Huh. That is the specific thing I understood in the hospital that I had not understood before the hospital. Not understood in the intellectual sense. I had the intellectual version of the understanding, had read the version of it, had encountered it in enough context to be able to produce the accurate summary of it if asked. The body stores things. The body carries the unprocessed material. The body eventually presents the bill for the carrying. All of that I could have told you before. The hospital, in the competent, informed, I have encountered this idea, form of the person who has the concept without the experience. The hospital gave me the experience. The experience is a different order of thing from the concept. I want to start with the before. Not because the before is the dramatic setup for the hospital event, because the before is the whole of why the hospital happened. The hospital was not the event. The hospital was the body's response to the before. The body's response to the specific, long-running, below the level of the dramatic, before that produced the conditions in which the hospital became the necessary thing. The before was ordinary. That is the specific quality of the before that I most want to convey. Not the extraordinary before. Not the before of the person who is in the obvious crisis or the visible deterioration or the specific dramatic. Everyone could see it trajectory toward the collapse. The ordinary before. The functional before. The before of the person who was, by every available external metric, fine. I was fine. I was producing, was meeting the obligations, was present in the visible sense in all the places that the visible presence is expected, was maintaining the relationships in the specific, warm, nothing is wrong here way of the person whose relationships are being maintained rather than inhabited, was sleeping in the technical sense, was eating in the technical sense, was functioning in all the technical senses of the functioning. The functioning was real. The fine was not. The fine and the functioning are not the same thing. I want to say that clearly because the confusion of the two is the specific, very common, entirely understandable error that the before contained. The functioning is the observable behavior, the output. The specific, measurable, can be pointed to quality of the person who is producing the expected things in the expected ways. The fine is the interior condition, the specific, subjective, only accessible from the inside quality of the person who is not just functioning, but is functioning from a place of genuine sufficiency, from the place where the reserves are adequate. With output is coming from the full version of the available capacity, rather than from the diminished version that is being managed to produce the appearance of the full version. I was functioning from the diminished version, not from the crisis version of the diminished, from the specific, quiet, this is sustainable for now version of the diminished that the body recognizes as the not sustainable indefinitely, and the mind categorizes as the manageable in the current period. The body and the mind had different assessments of the situation. The body was correct. What was happening in the before, I want to be honest about this, in the specific form rather than the general form. Because the general form is the one that allows the reading of the before as someone else's before, as the other person's specific condition that produced their specific hospital event. The general form is the one that maintains the comfortable distance between the reader and the thing being described. The specific form collapses the distance. This specific form is the one that allows the recognition, and the recognition is the whole of what I want the before to produce. There were three things happening simultaneously, not sequentially, not in the one at a time, manageable because discrete way of the stressors that arrive in the considered order. Simultaneously, in the specific overlapping total weight is more than the sum of the parts way of the things that are all requiring the resource at the same time, and the resource is not infinite, and the allocation of the insufficient resource across the multiple simultaneous requirements is the specific. Quiet, nobody's announcing this depletion. The first thing was the work, not the work in the general sense, the specific work, the having built work, the work of the person who has arrived at the point in the building where the building requires more than the building has previously required. Because the building is now larger and the larger building has the larger surface area that is exposed to the larger weather, and the larger weather requires the larger capacity to manage. I had the larger building. I did not have the larger capacity. I had the same capacity I had when the building was smaller, was applying the same capacity to the larger building problem, which means the application was insufficient, which means the gap between the required and the available was being filled by the something. The something was not the additional capacity I did not have. The something was the reserve, the specific finite has-bottom reserve that the body and the nervous system maintain for the conditions that require more than the ordinary. The work was drawing from the reserve. Not all of it. Most days, not even the majority of it. But drawing from it consistently without the corresponding replenishment that the reserve requires to remain at the level where it is available for the actual emergency rather than being consumed by the managed emergency of the daily. The reserve was being depleted slowly in the before. The second thing was the relationship. I have written about the relationship in various forms across this work. The specific quality of what she is and what the choosing of her requires and what the being in the actual contact rather than the managed distance contact produces in the interior. All of that is true, and all of that is the good version of the relationship's presence in the interior. The relationship also has a cost that the good version does not fully account for. Not her cost, my cost. The specific located, this is what the genuine thing requires, cost of the person who has decided to be in the full version of the relationship rather than the managed version. Who has put down the management? Who has put down the management? Who is present in the actual contact? Who is giving the narrow love? Who is staying in the exposed position rather than retreating to the protected one? The exposed position requires the resource, not more than it is worth, not more than the relationship returns, but the resources require. The genuine contact requires the genuine presence, and the genuine presence requires the specific, ongoing, cannot be set on the automatic setting resource of the person who is actually in it, rather than performing the being in it. The relationship was drawing from the same reserves, simultaneously with the word. Both legitimate, both worth the drawing, both drawing anyway. The third thing was the interior work, the specific, private, nobody else sees this work of the person who has been doing the honest examination, who has been looking at the managed version and understanding what it is but managing and asking the specific, uncomfortable. This is not a flattering examination questions about what has been chosen and why and what the choices have cost and what the alternative choices would have produced and whether the life is the actual life or the performed version of the life. In the interior work is not the dramatic work, is not the crisis-driven force examination of the person who has arrived at the acute crisis and is now required by the acuteness to examine the things they have been avoiding, is the chosen examination. The chosen examination in the specific, deliberate, I have decided to see clearly form of the person who has enough stability and enough safety to do the seeing without the emergency forcing it. The chosen examination is the good kind. It is also the depleting kind. The honest examination of the interior requires the resource, requires a specific, sustained, cannot be rushed without producing the shallow version resource of the person who is going below the surface and looking at the things below the surface in the honest light. The below the surface things are not always the things that have been waiting patiently for the looking. Some of them are the things that have been stored specifically because the looking was too costly in the previous periods. The things that are stored below because the surface could not hold them. When you go below to look at them, you are in the territory where the surface could not hold. That territory requires the resource. The interior work was drawing from the reserve, simultaneously with the work and the relationship. All three drawing, none of them individually. The crisis, together, the aggregate. The body presented the bill on a Thursday morning, not the dramatic Thursday, the ordinary Thursday. The specific, nothing special, was going to be a regular day Thursday that did not know it was the Thursday the body had decided was the threshold. I was in the middle of the ordinary morning movement. The specific, unremarkable, this is just the body going through the day quality of the morning that has not yet assembled itself into its requirements. Coffee. The movement between rooms, the specific functional not attending to the body quality of the person who is using the body as the vehicle for the day, rather than inhabiting the body as the thing the person actually is. The body interrupted the using, not with the subtle signal. The body had been using the subtle signal for a specific period of time, and the subtle signal had been received and managed and categorized as the manageable thing and returned to the background. The body had escalated through the subtle signals without the escalation producing the response the body needed. The subtle signals had been managed. The body stopped using the subtle signals. The specific thing that happened I am going to describe plainly, not for the drama of it, for the accuracy. The plain description of the specific thing is the thing that allows the recognition in the person reading it, whose body has been sending the subtle signals and who has been managing the subtle signals and who is in the before that precedes their own threshold moment. My chest. The specific, unmistakable, this is not the manageable signal quality of the thing in the chest that the body produces when the body has moved past the subtle and into the cannot be managed register, not the pain in the dramatic sense. the pressure, the weight. The specific located has a mass quality of something that is in the chest and is not the chest and is not supposed to be there and is not responding to the breath or the change of position or the specific involuntary. Trying to manage this interventions of the person who is attempting to return it to the background. It did not return to the background. My left arm, the specific radiating, moving in a direction, quality of the thing that the body produces when the chest thing is the particular chest thing that requires the immediate response rather than the managed response. I knew what it was, not from the calm clinical recognition of the person who has the information and is applying the information to the situation. From the below the information recognition, from the body level recognition, from the place where the body identifies the threat before the mind has assembled the threat into the language I called. The hospital is a specific environment. I want to say something about what the hospital environment does to the person who has been in it before that I described, not medically. Interiorly, what it does to the interior of the person who has been in the functional but not fine before and who is now in the environment that does not allow the functional performance to continue. The hospital removes the performance, not gently, comprehensively. The specific, complete, nothing of the before is available here removal of the performing version. The machines do not care about the functioning. The gown does not distinguish the position from the person. The specific, practical, cannot be managed away vulnerability of the body in the hospital environment is the complete removal of the managed version. What remains when the managed version is removed is the actual version. The actual version in the hospital gown on the hospital bed with the specific clinical, this is what the body is actually doing information arriving from machines, is a different version from the one that was in the before. Not more broken, more honest. The honesty of the hospital is the specific force. Nobody is asking for this honesty of the environment that does not permit the management. I want to tell you what I thought about in the hospital. Not the dramatic thoughts, not the organized, because this might be serious thoughts that the story version of this would require. These specific, involuntary, below the organizing thoughts that arrive in the hospital environment when the performing version is offline, and what remains is the interior in its actual form. I thought about the reserve, the specific located, this is what has been happening thought about the reserve and the drawing from the reserve and the three things drawing simultaneously and the below the crisis threshold daily depletion and the not replenishing and the specific quiet, this is what the aggregate produces arrival at the Thursday morning threshold. The thought was not the accusatory version, not the self-critical, you should have known better version, the honest version, the observational version, the specific, clear-eyed, this is what was happening in the before and this is what it produced version of the person who is now in the position of having the accurate information and is receiving the information without the management. The reserve was empty, not depleted, empty. The specific has a bottom, the bottom has been reached empty, that the below the crisis threshold daily drawing produces when it has been running long enough without the corresponding replenishment. The body had presented the bill for the empty reserve. The bill had arrived on a Thursday morning. The bill is the hospital. I thought about the replenishment, or the specific absence of it. The specific, observable, in retrospect, very clear absence of the replenishment across the before. The things that replenish the reserve are not the complicated things, are not the specific, organized, I have decided to pursue the well-being practice things. Are the simple things, the sleep that is actually sleep rather than the technical sleep of the exhausted body that goes horizontal and achieves the unconscious state without achieving the restorative version. The stillness that is actually still rather than the performed stillness of the person who is in the body still position while the interior continues the movement. The presence in the present rather than the specific ambient. Always slightly elsewhere, quality of the person who is in the room but is also in the next obligation and the previous unresolved thing and the future version of the problem they are currently managing. I had not been replenishing, not from the neglect, from the specific entirely understandable. I will get to the replenishment after this particular period error of the person who is in the before and is managing the before and is allocating the insufficient resource across the multiple requirements and is placing the replenishment in the category of the next period thing rather than the this period essential thing. The replenishment is not the next period thing. The replenishment is the this period essential thing. The body knows this. The body had been trying to communicate this through the subtle signals. The subtle signals had been managed. The body had moved past the subtle signals. I thought about her. Not in the crisis version of the thinking about the person you love when you are in the hospital and the specific acute. This might be serious quality of the situation, makes the thinking about them into the organized accounting of what they mean and what you would want them to know and all the versions of the thing I've described in previous pieces. The thinking was simpler than that. Thinking was, she is going to be in this room soon, and she is going to see the actual version, and the actual version is in the hospital gown with the machines and the empty reserve and the body that presented the bill. And the thinking after that was, she will not require the managed version. She's never required the managed version. The hospital has removed the managed version. The hospital has removed the managed version. What she will find in the room is the actual version. The actual version is the version she has always been attending to. She will find what she was always looking for. Not in the ideal conditions, in the hospital conditions, in the gown, with the machines, with the empty reserve visible in the most undeniable form. She will find the prior thing, and she will stay. Not because the staying is the noble thing, because the prior thing is what she came for. And the prior thing is here, even in the hospital, especially in the hospital, where the managed version cannot come, where only the actual version is present, where the body has finally made the actual version the only version available. This is the before, this is the specific, ordinary, nothing dramatic, entirely avoidable before that produced the Thursday morning. The second part is the after, not the medical after, the interior after. The specific changed, this is what the hospital produced in the interior after of the person who has received the body's bill and has paid it and is now in the position of understanding what the bill was for and what the payment has changed. The payment has changed everything that the before was managing, not because the hospital was the crisis that forced the change, because the hospital was the body finally being heard. The body had been speaking, the before had been managing. The hospital was the body speaking loudly enough to end the managing. The managing has ended. The after is what remains. The second part is the after. Not rushing, not in the organized, I have been notified quality of the person producing the emergency response. In the quiet way, the specific, unhurried, I am here now quality of the person who has moved through the necessary things and is now simply present, without the performance of the arriving. She looked at me, not at the machines, not the gown, at me. At the prior thing, at the version that was present, because the managed version had been comprehensively removed by the environment. She sat close. She did not say anything immediately, neither did I. When she spoke, she said, I need you to tell me what the before looked like. Not the medical before, the interior before, the specific, honest, what was actually happening before that. The body had been communicating through the subtle signals, and that the managing had been preventing from becoming the said thing. I told her, the three things drawing from the reserve simultaneously, the work and the relationship and the interior examination, all requiring the resource at the same time. The below the crisis threshold daily depletion, the not replenishing. The I will get to it after this particular period error that had been running long enough to empty the reserve. She listened in the complete presence way. When I finished, she said, how long? I said, longer than I knew until the hospital made it visible. She said, I saw some of it. I was waiting for you to name it yourself. Some things required the person's own arriving. I should have said something sooner. That is my honest accounting. Then she said, I want to tell you what I saw when I walked in. I said, tell me. She said, I saw you without the coat. Completely. The hospital has removed it entirely. What is in the room is the prior thing. Nothing around it. No having built. No position. No functioning person output. Just the person. She said, this is the person I chose. This version. I want you to know that. So the after does not rebuild the coat as the primary thing. So the coat, when it goes back on as the coat. As the thing on the outside, not as the definition of the person inside it, she said. The prior thing is the definition. The prior thing needs the replenishment. We will build the replenishment. That we landed in the specific, full, this is the actual partnership way, not the correcting of my accounting, the including of herself in it. I was discharged on a Saturday. The coat was in the hospital closet. I put it on to leave. It felt different on the way out, not heavier. Just more clearly, on the outside, the distinction between the coat and the person inside it was clear in the specific, experience-based, has-been-earned way. She drove. The ordinary light. neither of us requiring anything from the space. At some point she reached over, close, staying. The prior thing and proximity of the prior thing, no coat between them, no managed version, just the two people in the Saturday morning going hell. The first week of the after was the specific, quiet, no ambitious returning quality of the person who has come out of the hospital and is in the actual recovery. The body requiring the actual rest. The actual rest requiring the actual stillness. The actual stillness is not the technical version. The technical version is the body still, while the interior continues the movement. The actual version is both still, together, in the same place at the same time. It took 3 days to arrive at the actual version. On the 4th day, the interior also stilled. That was the beginning of the replenishment. She made space for the replenishment in the practical attending. This is what the body and interior need today for, not the organized caregiving. Some days, the actual stillness together. Some days, the being in the same room without the requirement. Some days, the honest conversation about the before and what the after needs to contain differently. She never produced the subtle pressure of the person waiting for the recovering person to return to the previous functioning version. She waited for the prior thing to replenish. That is the whole of what she did. It was the whole of what was needed. The hospital gave me something I could not have found otherwise, not medically, in the interior sense. It gave me the experience of the prior thing without the code, not the concept. The experience, the specific, embodied, has been lived, not just understood experience of being the prior thing in the room where the code cannot come. The experience is a different order of thing from the concept. I had the concept before. The hospital gave me the experience. The experience changes the relationship between the code and the person in the permanent way, not removes the code. Changes the relationship. The code is still present. The having built is still present. But the code is on the outside now. Clearly, experientially. The person is the prior thing. The code is what goes on top. The experience does not diminish the way the concept diminishes. The experience remains. This is the after, not the complete after. The beginning. The replenishment, first after. The body as the thing, not the vehicle after. The coat on the outside, that thing, not the vehicle after. The coat on the outside after. The prior thing as the definition after. Daily, in the ordinary hours. In the home, that is the replenishment space now. In the stillness, that is the actual stillness. In her presence, which has always been attending to the prior thing, and now I am attending to it too. From the inside, finally. The body spoke, the body was heard. The after is the response to the hearing, daily, from here, one replenished morning at a time.